This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Duwi Yogeswaran, and I'm one of the co-founders of Tamils in Finance, and I'll be moderating today's panel. Tamils in Finance is a network of established and emerging Canadian Tamil executives in investment management, commercial and retail banking, sales and trading, risk management, private equity, venture capital, and other financial sectors. I myself work for BMO Capital Markets, where I work for the Cross Asset Solutions Group in equity-linked note structuring. Prior to that, I worked as an equity derivative sales trader for about 10 years. Today, we're very excited to kick off our leadership series with Raj Viswanathan. Raj is the Group Head and Chief Financial Officer at Scotiabank. He was appointed to the role in December 2019. Raj oversees the finance department, including business line finance groups, finance and strategy, economics, taxation, chief accountants, procurement, investor relations, group treasury, and strategic transactions and review. Raj first joined Scotiabank in 2002 and has progressively held senior positions in internal audit and finance. I will let Raj elaborate on his role in just a little bit, but prior to starting, I wanted to go over some quick housekeeping. I'm going to be leaving plenty of room at the end of this panel for questions, so I encourage you to please send your questions through, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. And with that, I'm going to delve right into it so we can make the most of our time with Raj. Raj, thank you so much on behalf of Tamils in Finance for joining us today. We're very excited to have you. To start the panel, to kickstart this conversation, I thought it would be valuable for us to, for you to go over your career journey and how you landed your role as CFO of Scotiabank.
Thank you, Duwi. I think it's a pleasure to be here, and I haven't spoken Tamil in a long time, so I'm going to say vanakkam to start the evening, and hopefully people can relate to it. Yeah, I think it's been a journey, like you mentioned. You talked about a lot of the groups that I have accountability and responsibility for to oversee at this time, but it built over time. I joined in 2002. I'm an accountant by training. So I was in the internal audit department in the capital markets audit. So I know a little bit about what you do for a living on a day-to-day basis. I wouldn't claim more than that. But the bank has been extremely nice to me to give me a number of opportunities along the way. And I can say that with conviction, not because of the outcome, but because of the journey. Now, I started in audit, capital markets, exciting area. I didn't have much of a background in capital markets. So they gave me that opportunity. I made the most of it as far as I was concerned from a learning perspective. And then they moved me to finance to oversee M&A at that time. And it was split responsibility between the corporate development office and finance. So we're more like a control function to validate the models, those kind of things. Again, an area which I had limited experience in, but very excited to learn. And then they moved me to capital management, Basel Capital and those things, which many people know today if you know about banking, but I didn't know anything when I moved to capital management in 2008. And it was 2 months before Lehman declared bankruptcy. So, proverbial perfect timing, or perfect storm, however you want to call it. But again, it's another opportunity where you get thrown into the deep sea to learn. So very fortunate to be given a number of opportunities. They moved me back to internal audit as a senior vice president in 2011 and brought me back as chief accountant in 2013. And, eventually I'm fortunate to do what I do today. It started sometime in 2018 and it's been about 3.5 years. It's a very interesting journey. And if you picked on the theme, almost all of it was they asked me to do something. And that to me is why I feel I'm very fortunate to work for who I work for and being given the opportunities that I've been given over the last almost 20 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So it sounds like your openness to take on new opportunities and your curiosity really helped you ascend in your career. But I do have to ask, as a young student or young professional entering the workforce, did you always have your sights set on entering the C-suite or becoming a CFO, or like you said, is it something that just happened because of the opportunities you were given?
No, I think the short answer is God, no, right? I'm not. I don't plan as much, so certainly not. And of course, I grew up in India, so I went to university there. Frankly, I didn't even know I was going to leave India. It's not
Right.
anything was planned. I was very happy. I had great opportunities in India before I moved to work for KPMG in the Middle East for a few years, about 4, and then I moved to Canada in '97. So no, I think it's a journey. It's the enjoyment of the journey, taking the opportunities that were offered to me, and to be fair, in all instances, I did not say yes. And I have a certain approach to how I want to manage my career. I don't manage it very closely, but I will only take opportunities, or did take opportunities, which I thought I had more than a 50% probability of success. So not really planned, but I think I've been very fortunate to be offered opportunities to my strengths. And I've also worked for a lot of people who I think, looked at my strengths and chose to overlook a lot of the many weaknesses I have. So it's a combination of many things that results in success, I believe, and from at least to where I have gotten to so far, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful message for especially the younger members of our audience today, that you don't necessarily need to have your life figured out at a certain age, and just being tenacious, taking on new opportunities with some thought, like you said, and being curious, crossing bridges when you actually get to them can help you get to your final destination as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. As we are on the topic of positive attributes and some of the positive attributes that you had that help you ascend in your career, can you talk to us a little bit about attributes you look for when you're hiring?
I think there's many, apart from table stakes, which is you need to have the requisite skills um, to deal with the functions that you have accountability for, and that's a given. But outside of that, you think about all what we think as non-technical skills. You can call it leadership, communication. How do you work with other people, compatibility. So there are many things you look for. If I were to pick one, because most of us are skilled, that's why we get to where we are. It doesn't matter what level, right? As we progress along, we demonstrate certain key technical skills, which makes a big difference as we progress in the career. But I think at some point, what distinguishes people from succeeding more than others who get stalled at some stage, in my view, it comes down to compatibility. You never win as an individual, very rarely. You win as a team, right? And we all play our role in it. Doesn't matter how big or small the team is. And if you're compatible with the people you work with and you believe that you want to support each other as you go through, then you realize the outcome is 1 + 1 = 3 in many instances. So to me, depending on which team we are hiring for, I look for certain qualities which I think would be, of greater importance at that time. But the common thread for me is about how can people work with each other effectively. And there are many advantages to it, apart from everything else that I just mentioned, is as a supervisor, otherwise you have a daily problem. If people are not able to work with each other well for the common good or for whatever the objective we set ourselves for the organization as a whole, there is always a bigger cause, right? In my case, it's 90,000 employees and a few thousand shareholders and a bank which has got a market cap of $100 billion. That's what you're always trying to achieve and keep these people happy or deliver on what their expectations of you are and therefore of the team. So to me, that makes a big difference. If you have a team which is not working well together for whatever reason, then you have a bigger problem than the level of incompetence, which you can always identify, overcompensate, invest, and do stuff. So if you were to call out one, it would be that.
Yeah, and that completely resonates with me. I was recently speaking to a mentee about what I personally think is important to succeed in your career, and I told him that being smart is important, working hard is important, but the most important thing I believe is being able to form meaningful relationship with people. So that really ties into what you just said about compatibility and how important that is in employees. I want to pivot a little bit now and talk a little bit about Scotia. So Scotia, as we know, one of the big six in Canada, it's a large multinational banking and financial services company that really prides itself on creating an environment where all employees can thrive. So can you speak a little bit about the D&I efforts that Scotia is undertaking, and specifically how you have been involved in the diversity and inclusion effort?
Sure, Duwi. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and obviously it's something of greatest interest to me in many respects. We all have moved from various parts of the world, and we believe we're all different, but we're all strong in our own ways. So we bring something both to the organization and the country. Once again, I'm very fortunate to work for an organization that recognizes it. And to some extent, it comes as part of the territories we operate in. We operate a lot in Latin America. So to us, and we've operated for almost 30 years in many of these countries. So to identify diversity and to identify the strengths of being a diverse organization, I think comes natural to a lot of people in Scotiabank, even people who had management roles before me. But now the bank has got a lot of employee resource groups. We call it ERGs internally. And more recently, the D&I and employee resource groups are obviously doing a lot of work, from many unfortunate events, as we all know. So I don't want to go back to that. But out of all the bad events that happen, there's always something good that comes out. You shine the light on something, you recognize that there is inequality around the world, in the world that we live with, and in the communities that we live around. So we have a multi-year diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So it has got very specific goals and initiatives for advancing DEIs. And in three categories: what do we do for employees, what do we do for our customers, and what do we do for the communities that I referenced. Employees it's actually very simple. Our goal is to provide employees with an environment where everyone can belong and thrive. Diverse teams who can work together, bring the best in each other, outcome is always going to be better. So we recognize that we want to do more and more to ensure that our employees feel that way and work, as a team. For customers, same thing. I mean, we live in a diverse community. Canada is, well known to be a place of destination for a lot of people. Some of us come in as economic migrants, other people come in from unfortunate circumstances in their countries, but they all come with a certain skill set and a drive to succeed. That's the customer base we want to support completely, and we want to offer customers and partners a banking experience. We all need to bank, we all need to interact with the bank and so on, free of bias, ensuring that our product and service offerings are tailored appropriately, marketed appropriately. We also have procurement practices as we deal with vendors to ensure that we reflect the diverse communities and cultures we serve. So that's the second thing. Communities is to have an impactful community partnership and program. We want to be involved in the community, like BMO, like every other organization. I think we have an important social role to play as a bank, not just about lending and supporting the economy, which is core to what we do, but we also want to be sure that we want to make efforts to eliminate racism, any form of discrimination or harassment, and offer products and investment initiatives. In Scotia, more recently, we started something called Scotia Rise, which is a $500 million 10-year program. And part of it is to ensure that D&I values are appropriately recognized, and we're able to continuously, invest in all the communities that we serve with our customers and our employees, so we can get the best out of all the partners that we interact with. So a little bit of overview. We do a lot, as you would imagine, but this I would probably call as a good summary and probably some highlights that I thought I should highlight for you.
Great, thank you so much. The founders of Thummels in Finance certainly had diversity, inclusion, and breaking barriers top of mind when we created this organization. So it's very encouraging to hear what a much larger organization such as Scotia is doing on the D&I front, and thank you for your involvement in that as well. I wanted to move back to the work, the employee experience. Can you speak a little bit about how you create motivation for your team?
Yeah, I think it's a daily initiative in my view, right? You can motivate a lot of people by living the values that you talk about. I think people look up to others, not necessarily as leaders, I'm saying. A motivated employee we know is a highly productive employee. Without a doubt, I think there's enough studies that prove that and so on. But when we think about how can we do this on a daily basis, You want to ensure that people give out their best. I talked a little bit about the environment you want to create, so people feel like this is an environment where I can live, thrive, and excel, and therefore contribute to what we need to do as an organization. The the biggest thing that motivates me, I'll tell you, is I always believe that there is a solution to a problem. It's our job to go and find it. Or there's always a better way of doing anything as part of our day-to-day activities. Those are all easy things that we can all remember and we can continue to think about it as we go through our daily activities. As leaders, if you're a leader of, I don't know, a team of five, or if you're a leader of a team of 500, it doesn't matter to me. I think people look to leaders to live the values which they talk about. It's easy to talk, talk is cheap. We all know that. If you're able to live that every day and you're able to actually demonstrate that I'm as curious as I want my team to be, I'm as thoughtful to saying how can we get the best solution for the particular situation we're dealing with. I'm as committed to investing in technology and in people and in training, then our teams follow the same example over there. So there's a big responsibility that we all carry. You can motivate people in many, many ways, and different people get motivated by different things. I mean, we all talk about compensation as a big contributor, definitely. That's table stakes again. But at some point, the dollar is going to stop motivating anybody. That is just reality, right? It's a law of diminishing returns, or whatever we learned in economics in high school. It's that at some point you need to understand what else motivates people. Some of it will be career progression. Some of it will just be a challenge that they want every day. They want to know the before and after. What did they do to contribute to something becoming better? If you start identifying it and paying attention to the teams that you're working with or the individuals you're working with, you start realizing that they want to be aligned with you. They are driven by the same values or the same ideas that you are driven by and motivated by the same thing. Constantly, we need to remind people. We all talk about failures because we identify it, we feel bad about ourselves, whether there was a miss in finance and we didn't do some accounting well or whatever it might be. But I think we as a team always try to focus on, we need to celebrate some wins too regularly, because roles like finance are considered, if it's a win, it's part of your job and basically you did your job. And if it's a failure, you didn't do your job. It's a very binary and probably a traditional way of looking at it. It's a journey. So when people start recognizing that we celebrate wins as much as we, hold ourselves accountable when we don't do our job very well, they feel that there is a balance and fairness, and you can continuously motivate people to give the best that they want. Few examples again. People are different. That's one thing we need to remember. And different things motivate different people depending on the stage in life they are or what is bothering them today. You can't deal with everything, but at least you should be able to say, I made an attempt to deal with it. That's called empathy. If you're able to provide that every day, I think most people would relate to you.
Great. Raj, I was going to ask you how you avoid staying complacent in your role, and you kind of answered that right now. It sounds like you try your best to embody the qualities that you want your employees to feel. So you show that you're curious so that the employees also motivate themselves to be curious. So thank you for sharing that with us. We've spoken a little bit about your job. We've spoken a little bit about Scotiabank. On more of a personal note, can you tell us a little bit about some of your hobbies, things you like to do in your spare time, and specifically how you manage your very strenuous and high-profile career along with hobbies and your family life?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy, but I'm very fortunate. I've got a great family. I have a very understanding family, and they know that at certain times of the year or the quarter or the month that my time is probably not available to them. So that makes a big difference. And I'm very fortunate to have that kind of setup at home. I have a lot of friends, social friends and so on, because none of us have family over here since we all migrated over here, our friends become our family. They are a big outlet for us. As far as hobbies go, many years back I used to read a lot. I'm starting to getting back to reading a bit, and the trip that I had to India gave me some time to read on the plane and so on. So today I'm reading a book called Why Nations Fail. I like to read stuff which is non-fictional. I love fiction too, but I prefer non-fictional because I learn something out of it. The other hobbies is, I mean, people who know me well know that I like sport a lot. I watch a lot of sport, and I watch a lot of baseball. I watch a lot of basketball, and to me, it's very fascinating. I learned the game just by watching it in many respects, at least baseball. But I also understand that stuff like baseball has got a relevance to day-to-day life. I know there's jokes about baseball. Baseball is more serious than life, and life is easy and all that. But there's some truth to it. It teaches you a lot of things. It's a game where you can win in the bottom of the ninth inning, which tells you that life is long. It doesn't mean that if you're not winning in the early stages of life, you're not going to win the game. Baseball teaches you that. It also teaches you a lot of things about being resilient. It's not an athletic sport, we all know that, but it's a strategic sport. So to me, hobbies are also a way that I treat, there's a learning experience over here. I've matured over the years to learn through it. I watch a lot of sport. I do reading as much as I can outside of work related reading, but I have an exceptionally good work and home environment, which makes it very easy for me to balance stuff.
Thank you, Raj, for sharing that with us. I do want to get a couple of your takes on the economy. So pivoting to speak a little bit about the economy, maybe we'll start with interest rates and inflation, because those are always hot topics that are always hitting the headlines. We know today the Bank of Canada raised its benchmark rate by 50 basis points, and the Fed also raised rates last month and has signaled that they will continue to do so in the coming months. Perhaps we'll stick to the Canadian economy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think about the Bank of Canada's long-term plans in order to combat the demand for goods and services and thus combat inflation?
No, it's a tough job they have. I think that's an understatement, right? Tiff Macklem, who's now the governor, used to be on our board, so I had the privilege of talking to him when he used to be on our board. Very smart man, and obviously the right man for the job, in my opinion, at least. Tough job. We are faced with a situation which is there's no precedence. They can't go back to it saying, "Oh, this is what happened in 1994 or something, and here's how we want to deal with it." Supply chain issues are new. We unfortunately have a war going on at this time, which is creating its own problems about certain goods and services which may not be available to us in the short term. And then there is runaway inflation. There's lots of liquidity that went into the system to deal with the pandemic in the last 2 years. And we all know that when too much cash chases too few goods, it creates inflation. Again, one-on-one economics. Now, there's not many tools that the central banks have anymore. Early days, you could raise rates, you could use rates as a lever to continue to manage inflation. You realize that some of these issues are not probably rate sensitive. So it's going to be challenging. But those are the tools they have. So they're trying to use it, like you mentioned, Tiff raised rates by 50 basis points today. It was expected. Going into the year, we knew that we're going to have probably 4 to 6 rate hikes in Canada. We're only at 3, each rate hike being 25 basis points. Our economists had called it out, saying that we're going to have more rate hikes than what the central banks are leading us to believe. The reality of the situation is this. Now, they have a target inflation rate of what they call neutral rate, or 2%, as most people interpret it as. We're way above it. Most recently, the inflation that came out was close to 6%. So it's a lot of inflation out there, and people can feel it. I think, people go to the grocery stores, they can see the price hikes and so on. If you go to the gas station, you know how much you pay and so on. So it's very transparent to the individuals. And when it gets to that level, they want to see action as individuals from the people who have the powers and the central banks and so on. So rate hikes are one way to do it, but there's going to be a long journey, in my opinion. Because supply chain issues are not going to get solved as quickly. The war is, hopefully it'll end soon, but then you always have lingering effects of war that could have issues relating to some of the products that we all import from Ukraine or Russia and these areas. So that's going to take a while to deal with it. The geopolitical situation is also going to deal with energy. Like, Canada is fortunate that we are an energy producer rather than an importer of energy. So we might have some tailwinds to the Canadian economy. The good part of it is we also see full employment, almost, right? It's exceptionally high. Unemployment levels are really low, but it also spirals a problem, because when you have low unemployment levels, there's going to be lots of money in the system, which is again going to drive higher inflation. It's a vicious cycle. I'm not an economist, as people know, But it's very fascinating to see how this is going to play out. There are limited tools that are available. There's going to be some ups and downs and volatility as we go along. I mean, you probably see this every day. Bond deals are moving around, and nobody can predict where it's going to be next week. It seems to be extremely volatile both here and in the United States. So that will create liquidity issues because people are now going to hold on to cash because they believe that the yield could be better next week or so on. The people who normally fund the system. So I think there is more to come, but when it comes down to economies, central bank powers, and so on, there is only so much that they will be able to do, in my opinion. But they will continue to do what they're going to do. At some point, they'll get it under control, but perhaps not in the timelines that they think they'll get it under control.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Everyone is definitely feeling the penny pinch. Everyone's mentioning that in the last several months. And also agree with you that it is a very difficult job that the Bank of Canada has to do because they need to raise rates to combat inflation. But by raising rates, it's a fine balance where you're trying not to increase wage demand growth too much either, right? So it's a difficult job for sure. Another banking question for you. You started at Scotia in 2002. So this year is going to mark 20 years for you at Scotia. Congrats on the milestone. You've been around and seen different banking cycles and banking trends. Can you speak a little bit about how banking has changed and shifted in the last 20 years and perhaps also add in how you see it trending in the next, say, 5 years?
It is a lot has changed, I think. The easy ones is to call out the digital adoption, online banking, those kind of things which are very transparent to people and individuals. But how we do business has also changed with, say, corporates, commercial clients, and so on. We start realizing that there's a lot of people who are involved in the banking system. We're one of the largest employers in Canada. The business of banking has remained generally the same. We all borrow money, we all lend money, and we try to support the economy and support the customers we deal with. So that I don't think will ever change, but how we do it certainly has changed. The number of branches have shrunk, either in size or in just volume. We know a lot of our younger customers really don't want to talk to people. They'd rather, use equipment to deal with us. So how do you build behind it? Technology adoption, I think, has been fantastic, but also technology support in the back office operations and so on. There's lots of automation that has gone in, which is not apparent and transparent to our customers who deal with us because it happens in the background. And there's a lot of people who do some great work in the background to ensure that you can keep the bank operational. Think about the pandemic that we all went through now. In many, many respects, I think the banking system held up really well. Deferral programs that we ran being one of those, or just keeping branches operational and having the ability to do business with us, I think is fantastic. The rollout of the digital applications and so on. And that didn't happen overnight. It happened over a period of time. And I can speak for Scotiabank. I think we started investing in digital and technology. And, Brian Porter, our CEO, made a very famous statement internally where he said, we are a technology company that is selling financial services. And that's not meant to be cliche. That's meant to get people focused on saying, hey, we need to invest in technology to get ahead. Because at some point, our customers are going to demand this beyond what they're demanding today. And that's visionary. Now, it takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of commitment over an extended period of time. And you need to get people aligned. And you're going to make mistakes along the way, so you should be willing to accept mistakes. And that's the evolution of banking. But being part of the social fabric, as we talk about internally in Scotiabank, that will never change. Your values should never change. The fact that you are there to support your customers in good and bad times should never change. And I think most of us demonstrated it, if not all of us, in the banking system here in Canada. But how we do business with our customers and how our customers want to do business with us has certainly evolved. Tangerine is a digital bank that we're very proud of. And it started with saying what branchless banking. We have over 2 million customers in Tangerine. That's evolution. Or even the most recent work from home. It's not restricted to banking, but certainly a concept that if you had asked me 2 years back, I would have said, no way. Today, I've learned something in 2 years saying, of course we can do it, right? And then you start adapting to the new reality, hybrid environments, all those things that we all talk about. Banking's changed a lot. Where is it going? Open banking is something that people have been toying with. And for some people who may not be aware, it's just about data sharing so that the customer gets the best deals possible, whether it's a banking relationship or it's a utility company or whatever. To be honest, it hasn't had great success in many parts of the world, South Africa, the UK, and so on. You can realize that these are all people who have tried it with some success. And there, I think security is a big part. As much as technology has been introduced, we know that cybersecurity has become a much larger risk than we ever imagined. Our cybersecurity budget, without disclosing numbers, has grown exponentially. Does it contribute to higher revenue? Not really. Does it contribute to an expense base going up? Yeah, it does. But that's what the customer demands. They want to deal with us 24 hours, so we got to invest in it. I don't see that changing. If anything, it's going to increase. But eventually, what is going to happen is we have to become more and more efficient because the revenue stream has to be managed in a manner where, sorry, our expense base should be managed in line with our revenue stream. That's what our shareholders demand. So we got multiple stakeholders, like every other public company. How banking will evolve is difficult to predict 5 years down the line, but we know it will evolve. It will be different than what it is today. So if you want to be nimble, you want to be innovative, and you want to be completely open to change and continuously adapt, the banks that do that better will be more successful than others.
And like you said, the hybrid work model is something that no one could have expected or thought would be possible, and now we're living it. I wanted to pull in one of the questions that we got tied into what you were just speaking about. So wonderful to see a down-to-earth success story. The person would like to know what your view is on asking employees to return to work.
Yeah, I think, we are human beings. We need social interaction. I think that's a reality, right? There's always a mix we like. And I think the hybrid environment provides that fantastic opportunity in many respects. One thing we did notice, and that's a learning for me over 2 years, productivity, in my opinion, did not reduce over the last 2 years. Productivity, some people will argue, it's probably improved because now people know that they can balance their life and work much better than otherwise. You save commute time, all the stuff that most of us know. So that's what I've learned. But to me, returning back to the office, as we call it, somebody corrected me when I said at work, it's return to work. They said, no, people have been working, right? I think there's a difference. Workplace maybe is the right way to say it, is important. I think many of us build teams because we can interact with each other. You walk across a corridor, you have a conversation, or you just have an idea that pops in your head and you want to talk to people. Schedule meetings like, whether it's Teams and Zoom and these kind of things are a nice tool to have. But when life comes back or you want to come back to some level of normalcy, if I can call it, you want to have the return to the workplace. To me personally, yeah, I spent only 5-6 weeks at home, and since then I've been going into work. So I'm not a good example. But what I know from the teams who have started coming back to work is they're actually enjoying it. They enjoy it because it's almost on their terms. It's 2 days a week, 3 days a week. We tell them, don't pick Mondays and Fridays only, right? I mean, you need to mix it up as a team. So we get to meet people. And for the last 2 weeks since I've been back from a vacation, I've actually walked around and met some of my teams. We have a big cafeteria in the bank. And I go there with two intentions. Obviously, I want to eat, but outside of that is I actually get to say hello to many people. And now I see 50, 60 people in the cafeteria. It's nice to say hello to them and talk to them. And I think it solves the social aspect of our lives. If we do this right, we'll benefit from all the investments we have made, and we'll benefit from the learnings over the 2 years without giving up something.
I agree. I've recently started going back to work as well, and there is something to be said about being with your team, and sometimes you just overhear things, and from overhearing things, you come up with an idea or something new that you can do. So that resonates with me. You were just mentioning Tangerine, Raj. What are some of the drawbacks of Tangerine versus traditional banking?
No, it is a really good question. We talk of Tangerine as a success story, so we tend to focus on the positives. It's like everything else. Every business model has areas that we can do better, or we'll just have gentle drawbacks. Customers, you want to know them well. like a conversation like this, even if it doesn't happen in person, if you speak to one of our branch people, they'll tell you the benefits. I go to my branch once in a while because I want to say hello to my advisor and talk to them. They appreciate that. There is something back to the human interaction and the return to the office and so on, which Tangerine can never offer. Yeah, we do pop-up branches and stuff like that to interact with people, but really it's a branchless banking system. It's meant for a certain clientele, if you ask me. And even within that clientele, it's meant for certain banking activities that they want to do. Because even they at times will say, okay, you know what, I'll deal with Tangerine, but I also have a Scotiabank account because certain things I'd like to come into the branch to do it. The advantage for Tangerine we have is we're able to offer that option to our customers. Okay, you want a Tangerine deposit product, so you just want to do everything online, move your money around, or you want to have a credit card where you just want to keep using it, paying it, or you really do not want to interact with people in the branch for a certain period of time, you can have a Tangerine account and you'll be fine. Scotiabank has also got its own online and so on, but Tangerine's brand is directed towards people who actually believe that that's the only way they want to interact with the bank most of the time. But it's also a brand that people have affinity towards because it's a low cost operation. So you don't have as much fees as you might pay to your other bankers and so on if you dealt with them. The downside is I think it's got a finite opportunity and it's probably got a ceiling. Now, Jillian Riley, who runs our Tangerine Bank, is not going to be happy with me if she hears this. But the reality is, everything has got a limit, right? As we talked about, just like this return to the office and so on, those kind of things. There's no such thing as you can have unlimited portions of something good, whether it's food or whether it's banking. I think it applies to the same thing. So those could be some of the downsides, but how you overcome them is becoming nimble. So you have to recognize what your customer is not using or does not like anymore, and you have to continuously innovate and see how you can help the customer. That way you can ensure you're always remaining relevant.
Right. And like you said, there's a specific segment of customer that will prefer Tangerine. That is what they prefer. So there will always be business for it. I'm just running through some of these questions. We've gotten a lot of questions, so thank you to those of you who have sent them in. Question for you: how important is a CA or CFA to become a CFO?
I think any educational qualification, what it gives you is a good foundation and some skill sets which you can always use. It'll come naturally to you at some point. The CA teaches you controls, why they're very important, because the CA tends to be focused on accounting, reporting, auditing. These all are towards, if I break my world into two, there's a group or a bunch of groups that are control functions, and there are a bunch of groups who are analysts and those who are business support areas, the way we look at it. The CA prepares you for both, but it's probably a little bit skewed towards thinking controls first. That's what I know how to do, and that's what I've learned along the way and practiced it. The CFA makes you an excellent analyst. So there is a big advantage. Now, there are many people who do both, obviously, right? As they build their skill sets. Educational qualifications and, people from Asia like us or people from, the subcontinent area, we love getting educated. I think that's what made us successful. That's what we think will continue to make us successful, without a doubt. But what it tells you at some point is, education gives you everything that you need. How you use it defines how successful you're going to be. In my case, I've never been on the analytical side. Throughout my career, I talked about it. I've always been on the control side. The change that I had to adapt in 2018 when I started this role is to think about my whole day differently. I have to think why analysis is important, why my shareholder is important. They're not worried about controls because their objective is different. But I don't have a CFA. I'm not a CFA, for example. So if you have it, it's an advantage without a doubt. But how you use any skill set you have is all that's going to define how good you're going to be in the role that you have. So both are excellent qualifications without a doubt. They prepare you for different things. You can take it to the next level, how you use it in your day-to-day life.
Agree. Can you speak to the concept of failure, Raj?
It is absolutely important to fail. If you're not failing, if you're 100 to nothing, maybe you're not trying as much as you should. okay? Or you're just risk averse in many respects. And it's easy to say you learn a lot from failures. We've all failed. I talked about baseball. Is the batter who hits 300 over 10 years goes to the Hall of Fame. You look at it, you miss 7 times out of 10 when you hit 300 in baseball. So you fail greater than you succeeded. It's a tough sport, in my opinion. Now, in Korea, you cannot hit 300 and go to the Hall of Fame, and if one existed, because you probably lose your job much before that. But maybe it's flipped. You win 7 times out of 10, and you're probably very successful. But the 3 times you lose is what you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot out of failures. The idea of a failure is to not get down on yourself. The idea of a failure is to keep it small. Big failures will cost you a lot. We know that, right? But day to day, we all fail in some way. It could be very small. It's something you think about and think, oh my God, you know what? I should have caught this. I missed it. Or in my case, somebody missed some accrual or somebody over accrued some revenue in a certain quarter. And we looked and said, how did we miss this? It's quite obvious when you look back and say, man, it was right in front of me and I didn't see it. You could characterize failure in many ways, but you have to treat it as a learning experience. And eventually, as a team, if you do not recognize that some people will make mistakes and there's operational risk and there is failure that's going to happen, the risk is actually higher because next time they won't tell you because they fear that there's going to be repercussions if I report a failure up there. And that makes the entire organization very risky, or the accountability that we have will become more difficult to discharge around. So I think recognizing that failure is part of what we do at work, recognizing that we want to get better from learning from failures, but also recognizing that you have some level of risk appetite because things will go wrong. We run complicated lives. We are all part of complicated organizations. Something will go wrong. But how do you learn from that? And how do you recognize that too is actually a good component of how you manage your risk in the business, which is just inherent to what we do.
So what you're saying is very important to create a culture where you accept failure, as long as you learn from it, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where people are hiding mistakes and it results in a much bigger error or bigger failure.
Yeah,
okay, next question. Being in a position of both influence, impact, and financial well-being, which gives you more personal fulfillment at this point in your career?
Look, I think
tough questions.
Financial component is really a recognition of what people think you're worth, what you contribute, and how they value what you do. So that to me is all I think about. I obviously am fairly financially comfortable, so I don't think about it. And I've never thought about it even when I made much, much lesser money. Because I grew up in an environment where I was taught to live within what I had. So it's not difficult. Again, I talked about my family. My family is the same. So it's easy to deal with the financial component. But it's a more method of recognition. So most of us believe that, hey, if I didn't get compensated appropriately, there can only be two reasons. Either I'm not doing it well, or somewhere you're sending me a message that I'm not performing to expectations. So that's just a recognition. Power can be intoxicating. Many times I tell people who I talk to in forums like this, CFO is a title as far as I'm concerned. It tells everybody what I'm responsible for, what I'm accountable for, and where the buck stops. If I treat that as that's who I am, I believe you start losing from that point. Because when I come back home, I'm dad. When I come back home, I'm a husband. Or when I come back home, I play with my dogs. That is who, as an individual, you are. Power can be intoxicating if you use it as power. Because using authority and power is actually very easy to get an outcome you're looking for. Because somebody has given you that authority. Either it's an expense authority or just a power to hire and fire people. You have to use it judiciously. I watched a lot of Spider-Man when my son was growing up. What does it tell you? With exceptional power comes a lot of responsibility. There is something to be learned from everything. I watch a lot of these things, and some of these things stick in my head. And that's something that's important because it's only a definition of what you're accountable for. If you start thinking about it in my mind as authority to do what I want, and that's how I'm going to feel important in an organization, I think you'll start losing from that day.
And I can speak for many people that know you, I'm sure, when I say you embody humbleness from the few conversations I've had with you. So you preach what you say. Next question, sitting in your position as a CFO at a major bank with many revenue centers, where do you see the long-term opportunities from a career growth perspective? So asset management versus retail banking, capital markets. Conversely, what do you see decelerating over time?
No, we love all our businesses. I think there is truth to it because we fund the economy. Doesn't matter which part of the economy it is, whether it's a retail customer, a corporate customer, commercial customer, derivative operations, or help people manage their wealth. People create wealth through their lives. They want to be sure that they're able to maximize it and leave it for the people who they want to leave it for. So banking is one of those, if you think about it and you take the step back, it actually reflects the condition of the economy, and it also reflects how well you do it to support the economy. We touch every aspect of the economy without a doubt, because credit is what funds everything, funds all growth without hesitation. You can say that. If you take the banking system out of any country, how are you going to move money? How are you going to fund people? How are you going to pay people, for example? So many things. So I think every part of the bank is fantastic. But if you want to zero in on many things, which one is perhaps more topical or has a greater opportunity for growth in the next 5 years, if you want to take that, we believe wealth management has got a huge opportunity. We all know where home prices are in Canada and how it has been growing. That's how Canadians want to grow their wealth. So we want to be there as a wealth advisor to help them grow. That's why our wealth management practice, either through investments or just by organic growth, we've been growing quite a bit over there. Retail banking will be retail banking. I think it's the most underappreciated part of what a bank does because it's not glamorous. It's day-to-day activity. It's a hard grind. You're doing $1,000 a day. You're doing, $1 million for somebody's mortgage over 90 days. Those kind of things. It's not glamorous, but very impactful. Think about it. We have about 975 branches in this country, give or take 5 over there. And these are our ambassadors. These are the people who actually they look at and saying, this is Scotiabank's employee, not people like me where I'm sitting in an office in the background over there. And these are the people who are the unsung heroes in many respects. So retail banking is actually very interesting. People can build a career around it and people can actually grow there. And retail banking will always be there because there's always going to be retail appetite and so on. Capital markets and those are evolving and will continue to evolve because that's the most dynamic part of any bank. That's where I think a lot of the innovation comes in. How can we do financial engineering as an example? So every part I think has got exceptional opportunity to grow as economies grow and how you can help the economy grow or even manage the economy as a whole. I'm a fan of every part of our business. I think that's an easy way for me to say it. As an individual, you need to identify where do you think you'll be the most successful. And typically it'll come down to where you have the best skill sets and the aspirations and the qualities you bring to it. So you pick the spot that you like and you'll be successful.
Yeah, you beautifully explained all the different aspects of banking and there are certainly very varying skill sets that you need to succeed in the different ones. So it is very important to hone in on what you can bring to the table and select that way. Next question, it ties into DE&I again. As a minority, what are your observations on how to navigate through a large organization and a structure that has embedded biases in social circles?
I think recognizing bias is the important thing. We come from countries where we have our own biases, right? I think bias is just part of being human. We are discriminatory. We are actually very judgmental of people, everything that happens, okay? And that's not to defend anything that happens. I'm just saying that's just recognition of reality. An organization like ours, or any organization for that matter, I think is making its way around it and saying, how can I become better? It is progress over perfection from an organization's perspective. Because if you could solve it in 5 years, what has been there for perhaps 500 years, then you're missing something, right? You're never going to solve this, but you're going to make progress towards it. As an individual in Scotiabank, however, I progressed in the organization, I've never thought of myself as a minority. I've not. It just doesn't come to me naturally. I just do what I have to do. And I've been fortunate. I worked in an environment where I probably have never been reminded of that. So I have some, fortunate environment and experiences that drive my views. The reality of the situation is this, Dewey. Okay, you have to recognize that inherently we are all biased. You have to recognize saying, how can I be good at not being that? If I believe that that is wrong, then I shouldn't be that as an individual. And when others do it, I think we have a responsibility to point out to them. And there are many ways to point out, right? You can be the most offensive and be aggressive with people, or you can be subtle, or you can pick your spot one day later and say, you know what, the comment you made yesterday was probably not appropriate. You have to educate people. People by nature are not bad people, right? We all grew up in different environments. We have certain biases and we exhibit them as we go through our lives. Education and reminding people that this is probably not appropriate and not acceptable helps them learn the next time around. So we have a responsibility not just to recognize it, but we have a responsibility, I think, to address it with people who probably don't realize they may be doing it even in an unconscious way over there. And we also need a little more understanding of saying, hey, we've come from a different culture. Okay. You can't expect people who've probably grown up in this culture to recognize the differences that you bring to the table or the differences in the environment you grew up with on day one. I think it's significantly better than what it was 25 years back when I came to this country, without a doubt. The level of knowledge, recognition, and saying that, look, we need to be better as a country. We're very fortunate to live in a country like Canada. Without any hesitation, I'll say that. The journey continues. We are part of the journey. We can make a difference. And for me, I've never felt like I've been discriminated against, even if I wasn't CFO of Scotiabank. I can tell you that without any hesitation.
Great. And that was that point resonated with me about how you have to recognize that everyone has inherent biases. And I was thinking about when I help out with the hiring effort at BMO. And because I come from an engineering background, I do, even with that, I have an inherent bias when I see engineering candidates. I tend to lean towards them. So that speaks to what you just said about being able to recognize your own biases and making sure, you correct those first. Next question. So thank you for your insightful advice so far. Countries are looking to reduce global carbon footprints. How do you see Canadian banks playing a role in ESG?
I think it's very topical, right? I mean, we had our annual shareholders meeting recently, and there's a lot of activist shareholders as well who, to them, they're very passionate. ESG is absolutely an area that we have to make progress on, invest appropriately to reduce carbon emissions. I don't think, I was going to say anybody disagrees with that. I think most people don't disagree with it. There's always going to be a percentage of people who will disagree with the science. So we'll ignore them for this conversation. Banks play a big role because we fund companies, we fund industries. Some are green, some are brown, and you want to make the browns progress towards green, and you want to support the greens so they continue to do what they do. That's how we think about it in this bank. The journey is long. That's why people give commitments of 2030, 2050, and so on. Because think about very simple things that we all live with. It's winter now, it's still winter in Canada, I guess, in April. We need heating. 95% of Canadian homes are heated by natural gas. 95%. Okay. So you want to transform 95% of our own homes from natural gas to whatever is an acceptable form of energy. Absolutely should make progress. But you're not going to do it in 2 years. You're not going to do it in 5 years. But you need a commitment to get there sometime, whether it's 2030, 2030, whatever it might be, as one example. The other thing is Canada's economy, when you look at, we are an energy economy in many respects. We produce energy. We produce commodity. We produce a lot of natural gas, for example, which the world needs. So how do you ensure that the prosperity that is there in this country is not lost? So you need to be thoughtful about it. You need to have a good plan. The government has a big role to play in this to ensure that you have appropriate policies that banks like us can implement and continue to support the economy, incentives and those kind of things. And you have to address this collectively. So it's got to be a thoughtful process. If you want to turn it off, for example, and say, I'm going to go to green tomorrow morning, I don't know whether you can do it, but let's say hypothetically you're able to do it. You've got to think about the consequences of it too. And some of it will be unintended consequences. So whether it's regulators, bankers, people who are passionate about these things, I think there's a lot of balance that people are exhibiting, because now they've got the attention of people saying, hey, you've done nothing, let's say till 5 years back or 10 years back. Today, at least we're forcing you to do something to address this as an issue. First, recognizing it's a problem, and then saying, what can we do about solving the problem? So I'm an optimist in life. Progress is always welcome. Okay. ESG is something that you can be passionate about, but it's also something you need to recognize can be a double-edged sword if you do it the wrong way. You might achieve something, but at a huge price. People who are regulators, governments, authorities have a responsibility to ensure we do it in a manner where the unintended or just the intended consequences are also affordable. And that journey I like. You've seen commitments now, whether it's by banks, we all signed up for net zero and those kind of things. And you're starting to see that there is action happening. That to me is, it gives me a lot of optimism.
Great. One of our audience members is curious, Raj, on your thoughts on when to take a new role. So you've moved around in Scotia quite a bit, and when is the best time to take a new role? When do you know things are getting stagnant, for example?
I think the day you think I'm not being, productive or I'm not being motivated enough is when you need to start thinking why. And then you start thinking, okay, I need maybe a different set of responsibilities or accountabilities or different teams I want to work in. And then you start thinking about it. My journey, like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of it is not my doing. People have asked me to do different roles, and I've been very fortunate to be given roles which have been impactful in my career. Most people need to think, what do I want to be? Okay. Not everybody, I can assure you, wants to be CFO. I can tell you that. When I became chief accountant, there was at least 6 people in my own management team. I'm talking about the bank's management team, who called me and saying, why are you going there? Because they felt it's a lot of work. It's long hours, particularly reporting timelines, and it's got a lot of demands. Why do you want to subject yourself to it? So everybody has a different requirement in life and a different stage in life where they think the requirements will change. So you need to identify saying, at what point do you say, I don't feel like getting out of bed and going into work today? And it could be many reasons. It's because of the people you work with you don't like, the work that you do you probably think is not motivating, or the work that you do you probably think is not taking me to where I want to go. And that doesn't mean by levels and money and all that. Some people just want to be motivated. They want to see that I contributed today to something, right? Or made something better over there. So when you start recognizing that that drive is not there, then it might be time to start thinking, should I be doing something different?
That was very empowering advice. We're coming down to the hour, so I'm going to end the panel very soon, but just wanted to let you know we had tons of questions. We're sorry we couldn't get to all the questions to audience members, but Raj, there's many comments about how your advice has been so empowering and how people have really, really enjoyed listening to it. So thank you again. I love ending career panels with this question because I think it's a good one. If you could give our audience members one piece of advice as they embark or progress in their careers, what would that be?
Take every opportunity that is offered to you. Okay, I talked about being given the opportunity to be the VP of capital management when I didn't know anything about capital. And that's a true statement. Okay. Life and career is long. If you're going to get down on yourself simply because you failed one day or you didn't get one opportunity or you missed something which you think would have been very impactful to your life, I think you're missing the point. We all have long careers. Most people work for 25, 30 years. There's going to be lots of twists and turns, setbacks, growth, everything is going to happen. Okay. Very rarely it's going to be a straight line. We know that it's going to be ups and downs, and we all go through that, both in personal life as well as in work life. I think you need to power through it. You power through it, you'll realize your full potential in my mind. And when you look back with pride. I look back with pride about the opportunities. At that point, I felt disappointed when I didn't get it. My first 2 VP jobs that people asked me to apply for, they didn't give it to me. So I was like surprised, like, I thought you wanted me to apply for this job, so I probably thought I had a greater than 50% chance, and they didn't give it to me. Was it discouraging that day? Absolutely. Was it discouraging for 1 week after that? Yes, it was. I thought the whole world was against me. How come you guys treat me so badly? I didn't do it deliberately, but when I reflect back, I said, you know what? I'm just going to go back to work because I like what I do. I used to be director of capital markets audit, like I told you. So you can't be discouraged for too long. I've learned that over the years. It's not like I knew it on day one and I knew exactly what I was doing every day. That's what I would tell people. Don't get discouraged. We are people, this is Tamils in finance group that we are talking about. We're all people who came here or our parents came here and we are, uh, benefiting from the decisions that people made. Don't think the world is against you just because of the environment you work in or just because you had a failure one day. You'll realize that when you go back, success after 20 years, however you define success, you'll look back and say, yeah, I was successful. And success is not only determined by the money you make or the titles you get or the power that you have. Success is what you define as success. And when you're able to achieve it, in spite of setbacks and ups and downs and so on, you start realizing that it was very, very satisfying. And that's what you want to do. So in the moment, yes, you should feel discouraged if you didn't get what you thought you deserve. Absolutely. Otherwise, the passion goes away, but don't let it drag you down. Life is long, you'll succeed.
Raj, I think that was a beautiful way to end the panel on a very motivational note. On behalf of Tamils in Finance, I again wanted to thank you for joining us, sharing your insights. It was definitely a lot of empowering advice. And thank you to the audience members for joining. Thank you for sending in your questions. I apologize I wasn't able to get to all of them. But hope to see you at our next event. And thank you again, Raj, for joining us today.
Look, it's my pleasure that I get invited to speak to people like this. If you think it's a good use of 1 hour, I think that's a great outcome as far as I'm concerned. But I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Take care, Duwi. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.